Welcome to the Total Soccer Show and our review of the USMNT's 2-1 win over men from the other side of the planet, aka Australia. We're going to go in depth on the US's latest tune-up, looking at key performances, the tactics, and what it means for Poch's team heading into next year. My name's Ryan Bailey. Joining me today, hey, it's Taylor Rockwell. Hi, Taylor.
Hello, Ryan Bailey. My daughter was very excited to learn that we were playing a team from the other side of the planet where kangaroos exist, and then almost immediately very disappointed to learn that there were no kangaroos within the actual squad. Really an oversight by the Australian FA. I hope they fix that sometime soon.
I'd have called them Chelswazzers.
Knifey spoony indeed. I loved this game. Or I liked this game a lot, not least because in the very beginning I watched it on Peacock in Spanish. Really enjoyed the commentators all, I think, knowing that they were mic'd, and I think knowing that they were live, discussing how I'm pretty sure it was Americans call him Poch. Poch? No, Poch. Poch. I see Poch. Like it was amazing. Just three dudes saying it over and over again in a loop as the lineup graphics came out. Lovely broadcast experience and a very enjoyable game for the most part.
Wonderful stuff. Joe Larry's here to talk about it. Hi, Joe.
Hey, Ryan. It is great to be here. Taylor, I'm wondering if your daughter would have been pleased to know that the Australian team's nickname is the Socceroos. Like, if there's enough kangaroo in that could have been enough for her. I assume not, but maybe that would have gotten you a little closer.
That was the faulty line I went down, in fact. They're called the Socceroos because kangaroos live there. And she was like, what? Are there kangaroos in the team?
Yeah, that's tough. Okay,
would be more
fair
fun.
enough.
Would be more fun.
That's entirely reasonable. I also realized on the Pochettino front the other day, I was just thinking about how much of a missed opportunity it is that the U.S. is starting to play some decent ball. Just when I figured out that as a way to kind of poke fun at Pochettino, we could be calling him Pochettino. Like, that had never clicked for me. And now it doesn't even seem like we're going to get to use it. And that to me feels like a waste. That's my fault.
You better watch a Tino yourself, Joe. With that kind of talk.
Well played,
anyway.
well played.
Joining us here, our very own waltzing Matilda Graham Ruthven. Hello, Graham.
Hello, Ryan Bailey. My daughter did not watch this game with me,
No
which could have been due to the fact that this was on at 4 a.m. my time, or the fact that she doesn't like me much. So, that's one of the two things.
Which do you think it was?
The latter.
She was actually awake watching Wales at the same time. It was very controversial.
She was 2 episodes into Gabby's Doll's House. She could have been watching the Socceroos, but no.
Oh, bless you, Graham. Your broadcast, Graham, was it directed by David Fincher with the nice sort of dark lighting that we had at
It was. So what I learned from the saturation of this broadcast is that I have not watched a lot of Colorado Rapids games recently, because apparently Joe says that is normal, but did not seem normal when I think Taylor had the same reaction when we tuned into this broadcast.
Yeah, you could tell the shadows in all of the players were extra sort of long and dark, which I assume was to do with the BDA energy at Dix Park.
Sure.
In Commerce City, Colorado. Maybe
Best
it's the
kind of
altitude.
city.
Yeah, indeed. Well, let's get into it just after I tell you about our bonus feeds. I don't think I've ever mentioned it on this feed before, but we have a Patreon, everybody. Patreon.com/Total Soccer Show. It is the best way to support us. You'll get bonus episodes, bonus video content, and access to our Discord server where all of the cool kids are hanging out. It is the best way to support us, and we love you for doing so. Thank you very much. Patreon.com/Total Soccer Show. All right, let's get into it. USMNT 2, Australia 1. Haji Wright scoring both the goals, rewarded with that start for his hot domestic form, of course. Broke the defender's ankles with that turn and shot for the second goal as well. We had the rotated lineup here, a back three once again. James Sands and Christian Roldan in the starting 11 here. Christian Pulisic starting too, although probably the most sour note of the evening, him coming off with the injury early on in this game as well. Australia scoring with their only shot of the first half via Jordan Bosch, and they had some action in the second half as well, but their game of knifey spoony just wasn't up to the US's ultimately. So, Taylor, our overarching thoughts of this, good performance?
Yeah. I expected going in, I think, after the last game that Joe and I spent some time on, which was Ecuador, that this was going to be a more comfortable win for the United States. Ecuador, I thought it might be like 2 or 3-0, because I liked a lot of the kind of patterns and rotations and the way the U.S. was possessing. It felt like everybody understood their assignment, understood where they needed to be and how they needed to kind of evolve that shape to make attacks happen. And I largely think that is kind of how this game panned out, barring that one very strange, very fluky, very preventable goal for Australia. I do think this went pretty much according to plan for the United States. albeit with that injury to Christian Pulisic, changing things quite a bit. And before I go too long, I would just say also a conundrum and maybe a things can be two things moment of I thought the U.S. were still exciting and fun when Pulisic was on the team. I thought they looked fun and more better organized when Pulisic was not on the field, which is not a shot at him. I thought he was very good. I just think when you don't have him there, the game plan changes a little bit more, but it felt like everybody got more involved and just tried a few more things, and it became that much more enjoyable as a result.
Very good. Joe, your thoughts on his performance? Also, how much different, how different, if you will, are you feeling from, say, 6 months ago in the Poch project? Are you feeling better?
Yeah, quite a bit better. It's nice to see this team continue to make progress, and there have been a lot of downs along the way. I mean, what? Was March 6 months ago? Just about. I'm not going to do the math. Things were bleak at that point, and the U.S. had their sort of best group together, and they weren't playing good ball back in that March window. And that's when Poch decided to tear this whole thing down and did it in some ways that I think were interesting and maybe not quite optimal. But at this point, and maybe we will do some more discussing about the past under Pochettino on another show this week. Hint, hint, we probably will. But it's also true that it seems like the U.S. is in a better place now, regardless of how they got there. The U.S. has now had 3 solid performances in a row. I think about in the September window, the Japan game, that was a good performance from the U.S. I think about the Ecuador game, and I think about this game. In this game in particular, if we want to use like a 1 to 10 grading scale, where 5 is that was a bang on average performance, and lower than that was bad, above that ranges from pretty good to great, I'm going to say this was like a 6 from the U.S. I think they were solid in this game. They were pretty good overall. There were some pretty obvious problems for the U.S. as well that I think a better team would have punished. But still, the U.S. had a decent game. They've been stringing those together. And let's not forget, they're missing, I was thinking about it last night, probably 5 starting players for this team. Both of the outside backs, at least one guy in central midfield, Balogun up top, and then we can count Pulisic as a missing starter in this game. That's at least 5 guys that you would have to make this first choice U.S. roster, I think even in Pochettino's eyes. So when you factor all of that in, you're probably looking at this being even a bit better than a 6.
Graham, where does it rank on your 1 to 10 scale?
Yeah, I liked what I saw. I thought it was a good performance in this game. I'll go with a 6.5 just to be slightly more positive than Joe. Around that mark is where I would land. I thought this match felt a bit more friendly-ish than the Ecuador game, and what I mean by that was in the way it ebbed and flowed a bit more. It was quite an uneven game where it felt like the US took some time in the first half to get going. And then there's obviously that spell in the second half when both teams are making changes and it just felt like the game died for like a solid 15 minutes. So in those periods, I don't know what to take from that for both teams, certainly from a US perspective. But yeah, generally I thought the response to going behind was good from the US. I thought it always felt like they were the stronger team. They had more gears to move through, which they did to win the game. I thought the real negative was, other than the Christian Pulisic injury, was I thought a lot of the defending was quite ragged. We obviously saw that for the goal, but I thought there were other moments as well when players were a step late or just didn't recognise danger. And that's been an issue for the US, defending inside their box for like a while, or just like doing the defensive basics. I've mentioned that before about this team. So that is slightly concerning, but the big picture is certainly more positive now than it was even like a month ago, like coming out of that South Korea game last month. I know the US finished that match pretty positively. I sort of thought that was a game state thing, and I was quite down about the US at that point. Now, and look, this is the foolishness of international soccer. It's only 3 games later, but I do feel a lot better about the direction that this team is heading in.
Joe, would it be okay to talk about some of the changes in the lineup, specifically up top? Haji Wright with 8 goals in 9 in the Champo this season, doing rather well, and obviously being rewarded for that. Has this threatened our stance on Balogun that we've had? Obviously, we're pretty bullish about him coming out of the Ecuador game. Are we feeling that there is a greater discussion to be had here?
Coming out of the Ecuador game, I assume by that you meant coming out of the Nations League back in 2023, which is when I started feeling bullish about Folarin Balogun. Actually, before
all right,
that,
settle down now. Settle down.
No, I'll let Graham's
have you been bullish
shaking
that
of
whole
his
time,
head.
Joe?
I have been bullish that whole time. I will let Graham's head shaking answer this question for me. No, I don't think so. Credit to Haji Wright for turning his performance around in this game. He was rough in the early stages of this match. Doesn't matter if you're rough for 20 minutes when you score 2 goals. So just to be very clear about that. But Haji Wright, even with his brace in this game, it doesn't move the needle for me enough to get him past Balogun. And the primary reason for that is when Haji Wright is on the field, the U.S. is just a more limited team. So what Haji Wright does really well, and you see it on both goals, is he spins in behind. He is a slashing number 9. That's part of what made him a decent option on the left wing at times in the past for club and country, is that he can spin off and run in behind, and that's valuable. But what he doesn't do so well is hold up the ball. And what Balogun does really well is even against bigger center backs, and we saw this against Ecuador to bring that game into the picture. Balogun does hold up play so well. And for Haji in this game, 10th minute, turnover and link play, sloppy pass, loses the ball. 11th minute, can't control Pulisic's pass in the box, another turnover. There were a good handful of those moments. Now, he did grow into the game, Haji Wright, to his credit, and still had a good game. But for me, Balogun's consistency, and he's been scoring goals as well, it's just too much for Haji Wright to overcome. Now, what I will say about Haji, very briefly, is it seems like he is Poch's guy over even Big Pat, which I think is notable. So Pat Ajiman doesn't sniff the field in this game. It's Haji Wright who gets off the bench for Balogun against Ecuador. It's Haji Wright who starts, and it's Balogun who replaces him in this game. We didn't see Patrick Ajiman in this camp. That surprises me. I would have had, coming into this window, Patrick Ajiman above Haji Wright in like Pochettino's estimations.
Why?
It does not seem like that's true at this stage. It seems like Haji Wright may have booked himself a World Cup spot last night.
Can I dig into that, Joe? Why would you have him above Right?
Ajiman, you mean above Wright coming into the window?
Yeah.
Just based off of how many minutes Ajiman got for Pochettino at the Gold Cup, and then just how much it seemed like Pochettino continued to go back to that well over and over and over again. Maybe that was a flawed assertion. Like maybe that was just never true. But it seemed like Ajiman was high up on Pochettino's depth chart. And then when Sargent falls off of that, and when Pepe's injured, okay, Ajiman's going to get a look, but he doesn't. Instead, it's Haji Wright. So I think that's notable. So I wouldn't have Wright over Balogun. I probably wouldn't have Wright over Pepe either. But I think I'd probably have Wright at the World Cup, at least as things stand right now. And I think Pochettino would too.
Big Pat seemed to be one of Poch's guys, right, along with Arfston and maybe like McGlynn to a lesser extent. So I would agree with that, Joe. I think Haji Wright probably has jumped him in the pecking order here. I think the question now is it Pepe or Wright as the number 2 here? I thought in this game, and look, I've been the Haji Wright advocate for a little while, so I will defend him to a certain extent. The 2 goals that he scored in this game is Haji Wright at his best. We got a demonstration of what he can offer this team. I think the second goal in particular is a demonstration of what he offers you with those runs kind of like down the channel. And with Haji Wright, you don't really want him to have lots of touches of the ball. So if you have that open space and you can play into it and you get him into the box with 1 or 2 passes like the US did down that right side for the second goal, then he's an excellent option to have. And I loved his execution for both goals, particularly the second one where he has a clear vision of what he wants to do as soon as he gets into the box, and the chop is excellent, and then the left-footed finish into the far corner. But I totally agree, he just isn't the all-round focal point that Balogun is, and so I still very strongly feel like he's the number 1.
I think I've been operating under the assumption that Balogun and Pepe are like somewhat fundamentally different styles of striker. Would you all would agree with that?
Totally.
With that in mind, then, which one do you think Wright is more aligned with, akin to? Because I do think like if it's going that way, you think he's more Pepe than Balogun?
Very much so. Even like from a physical standpoint, his build is similar. Both are slashers in that Haji scores his goals running in behind. Pepe tends to do that as well. And if you're looking for an area of Pepe's game that needs to improve, it's his link play. It's his back to goal play. And I think the exact same thing is true of Haji Wright. So I think they're not identical players, but I do think they're pretty similar, all things considered.
Okay. So then is there anybody who can do a discount version of what Balogun does? Or is that why you rate him so highly, Joe?
I mean, yes, that is why I rate him so highly. I don't really think there is a replacement for Balogun in this pool stylistically. Someone who moves the chains in possession, right? Someone who can be so strong back to goal, and then also do some of the savvy work off the ball, running in behind, and then creating shots for themselves on the ball. I don't really think that exists.
Fair.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. But yeah, I would still agree. I think it's Balogun and then probably Wright and then Pepe, just because we haven't seen Pepe in a little bit of time due to injury, and it seems to be that's the way Pochettino operates. But I think Pepe is still very much in the conversation.
Yeah. Obviously, Wright getting the minutes here because you do have to pick to form, right? Which is why Josh Sargent had such a spotlight.
He had a chance. He had a chance last camp,
right?
And he reminded us why Pochettino doesn't really seem to like him that much.
Yeah, he did. Certainly did. Let's take.
That's kind of why I'm more bullish on Pochettino in the U.S. right now. Is like it does feel like a lot of the rolls of the dice and a lot of the trials were for a purpose, and there was logic behind them. players came in, maybe didn't meet expectation, didn't train the way he wanted, weren't willing to play through like a small injury or something. And so he said, okay, then I kind of know where you fit. And I think that extends to players that have risen up the ranks. There's a very big one of those that I did not have on my World Cup roster a month ago and definitely do now.
Oh, let's talk about that player when we come back after these short commercial messages. Does that sound good, Taylor? Should we do that?
Sounds good to me.
All right, right back.
Okay.
Total Soccer Show, welcome back to our USMNT review of the 2-1 win over Australia. We're going to get to Taylor's mystery player. Can you guess who it is yet? But we'll get there shortly.
Zach Steffen. No one saw it coming.
But, Joe, we had a few, obviously, changes in the lineup, but we also had a back three once more here, a 3-4-3 from Poch in this game. What do we make of the system?
Yeah, it was a back three for the U.S. in possession yet again. What was different from the Ecuador game is that it was also a back three in defense. So for the second time, to my eye, in Mauricio Pochettino's tenure so far, in just about a year's worth of games, we got a 3-4-3 in every phase, except for build-up, where it's much more of a traditional two center-back setup. But in general, it was a 3-4-3 in this game. We've only seen that twice now for Pochettino. The first time was against Japan last month, and then this game against Australia. I think it's notable that Poch has only used that shape in both attack and defense against other teams who also play a 3-4-3. Now, if we remember back in that last window, the U.S. pressed South Korea in the first game of that window in a back four. They got shredded over and over again. They simplify in the second game against Japan. They go more man-to-man. The players talk about it after the game, said it was a little simpler for us. And then we get to the Ecuador game, and the U.S. are back in that back four. Well, I don't know that that's a huge surprise, because Ecuador weren't in a pure 3-4-3 in that game. Now Australia are the U.S. matchup man-to-man. I only go through all that foundation setting, stage setting, table setting, whatever you want to say. I'm setting something, because I think it's notable for the future, where if we're trying to figure out how the U.S. is going to play in any given game, if the opposition is going to play a 3-4-3, that feels like a pretty good sign that the U.S. are going to do so as well. The lineup for this game, 6 starters that were different from the last game against Ecuador. It was Matt Freese in goal. We don't learn anything new by Poch continuing to use him. No issue there. It was Alex Freeman as the right wing back. It was Tim Weah playing as the left wing back. A lot of interesting Weah conversation to be had, I think, at this stage. It was Miles Robinson as the right center back. It was Chris Richards through the middle and Mark McKenzie on the left. The double pivot was Christian Roldan and James Sands. I think you mentioned that already, Ryan. It was Weston McKennie and Christian Pulisic to start the game. That it was Luna in for Pulisic. In the half spaces, Pulisic/Luna on the left, McKennie on the right, and then Haji Wright up top through the middle. Just one other note on the lineup. We already had Alex Zendejas leave this camp due to injury, so he wasn't even around. Malik Tillman, Pochettino said, had felt a little something leading up to this game. That's why he doesn't play. And then obviously Pulisic comes off. So not a first-choice U.S. group, but between some of those injuries and Pochettino clearly wanting to rotate a little bit just to give guys minutes. Think about James Sands maybe as being a good example of that, somebody who'd never played under Pochettino before. It was not the U.S.'s strongest lineup, which I'd alluded to in the first segment. But still, all things considered, the U.S., after a slow start and they had to figure a few things out there, did grow into this game.
Joe, forgive me. Did you mention Jedi as well on that list of players who were gone?
Yes.
Okay,
cool. No, excuse me. I did not. In the first segment, I mentioned that he would be starting if fully fit, you would have to assume, but I didn't mention.
Yeah. And I believe was sent home prior to this game. So another one who wasn't there, another piece of evidence for this not being our full-strength lineup. And I do think that is partially why we saw that shift to the back three, though I think Joe has laid it out really well with matching the opponent and having that work really well. And I really liked a lot of this starting 11 given those limitations. I was even pretty excited for James Sands and Christian Roldan starting together, which I knew was going to be a minority opinion because I'm not sure how many people have watched a ton of James Sands, and then I know a lot of people have existing opinions about Christian Roldan. But I thought that partnership worked well in aspects. I think I understand why maybe a bit more creativity and passing ability would be ideal in there. But I thought Roldan in particular shone quite brightly in this game.
And I thought that was probably the most interesting part of the entire lineup was the midfield, right? Because one takeaway from this is that Poch is still unsure of what the double pivot in this system is. It feels like in other positions across the pitch throughout the team, there's like a solidifying hierarchy starting to emerge where not only do we know the starting lineup, like I feel like I could go through, barring injury of course and other factors, I feel like I could go through this team and name pretty much all 11 starters for the first game of the World Cup, with the exception of one central defender and one central midfielder, assuming one of them is Tyler Adams, who of course wasn't involved in this camp. And that is because it seems clear that Poch doesn't see Weston McKennie as part of that double pivot equation, which I am personally fine with. I know we're probably going to have some more Weston McKennie chat later on. I like Wes McKennie in the more advanced role, always have, and that was the position that he played over these 2 games. There was an opportunity to drop him into the double pivot here in this game, and Pochettino didn't take it. And these 2 games were used as additions for 4 different central midfielders over those 2 games: Tessman, Morris, Sands, and Roldan. Some fared better than others. But that says to me that this is an area where Poch is focusing a lot of his attention on and maybe doesn't quite have that hierarchy yet.
Who do you all... I'm assuming Joe's going to put Tessman top. Of those 4 central midfielders, who do you rank the highest coming out of this camp?
On the basis of the performance, I thought Roldan was the best that we saw over the 2 games.
Joe is nodding. I am nodding.
Agreed.
That was my player I teased. That is the guy who I think was not in my squad. I think there's a chance that he starts the first game of the World Cup. We'll see how things progress from here. But how organized he was, how much of an organizer he was, I should say. How often he was the one making everybody step, and then everybody stepped when he wanted the defensive line higher. He was the one who tended to try to find space in Australia's pentagram of frustration, I'm calling it, where they have the back 5 and then they have the kind of advanced 5 that clog the middle. It was notable to me that in the first 15 minutes, the U.S. kept trying to play around that or over that, or having to play around and over that. And Roldan was the first midfielder to start to actively take up space within it and then play 1- and 2-touch passes, but that makes that shape just collapse a little bit. It makes somebody come in and it opens up space elsewhere. And I felt like he was the one who was trying to problem solve in the moment without having to be told or yelled at by a vested, facial-haired Mauricio Pochettino.
Nice little vest he had on as well.
It was nice.
It was nice.
He looked sharp. I liked it.
Just for the record, the Australians call it the Penty of Frazzy. They abbreviate everything.
Thank you.
Everything, Taylor.
The Penty. Yeah.
I agree. I thought Roldan was the best player on the pitch, in my opinion. I also quite liked what Weston McKennie was doing in this game. Anyone else feeling that?
Yeah. I enjoyed that as well, and it sounds like we're all probably on board with Weston McKennie. I liked him in this game. I thought he was good, just like he was good against Ecuador. 11th minute, great long ball to Alex Freeman. 12th minute, starts to drop and find Haji Wright. I thought, in the early stages of this game, when the U.S. didn't quite find the way through Australia, and they were struggling a little bit for defensive intensity, they conceded that goal where Sands is at fault, Roldan's at fault. He admitted that after the game. It seemed like Chris Richards and Miles Robinson probably don't get off scot-free there either. It's a whole lot of flat-footedness from everybody but Bosch in that instance, and he's the one who scores the goal after he's the one who takes the throw-in. Big no-no there. Like, huge game-altering no-no there. So that is a big mark against Roldan in this game for all of his positives. But after
what did he do wrong there? Sorry. Because it's Sands who hits it, right?
Sands hits it. Roldan's just watching. Like, he's got a great seat, and maybe some snacks. I don't know, but he's not alone in that. Like, multiple other U.S. players are in the same boat. But it's inexcusable stuff across the board from every one of those guys.
Joe, I'm sorry. I want you to finish your point.
It's okay. This is a big moment in the game.
Why did everyone seem so thrown by that? Because, like I get that it's not supposed to go straight up in the air. I get that there's a moment where you think, like, oh, that's going out for a corner, or oh, he's put that out of touch or something, or into touch. But I don't get it. It doesn't seem like they were waiting for Freese to come or anything like that. But the entire U.S. team basically just stopped and was mesmerized as though fireworks were going off. And I don't understand why.
It's an unusual moment, right, for someone just to flip the ball up in the air inside the box. And the first moment of hesitation comes from Sands, where it's almost like, well, I've just sent that up in the air. I'm not going to chase after it. Someone else can do that. And then from there,
that makes sense.
it's just a chain reaction. Like, Roldan's slow to react. And then who's the third one? Is it McKenzie? Richards, is the third one. So it's a cumulative hesitation.
And even beyond that, we wouldn't even be talking about this moment had then actually the real crime for Roldan in this moment, was that he does actually eventually engage the ball after being too slow. So we were right about that. But he and Richards both converge on the ball, and they just are bowled over like bowling pins. Roldan falls flat on his back after getting a little bit of contact. He just can't hack it in that 1v1 duel. But it's a 2v1 duel because Richards is there as well. He commits way too early and gets it all wrong. And add that to the sin of being too flat-footed, and you've got just a total mess of a sequence. So early on in this game, I think we would all agree the U.S. didn't start the best in this match. But what I did like is eventually, and it seems like Roldan was a big part of this, the U.S. realized that there was space to play over Australia. The players talked about it in the postgame. We sort of expected them to sit deep in like a really compact 5-4-1. They did that sometimes. We certainly saw that in this game. But their manager, Tony Popovich, came out and said after the match, and this played out on tape, that they wanted to use this game to practice pressing against a team that was willing to play a little bit out of the back. And so Australia did press the U.S. And the U.S. did not play through that pressure very well at all. And I think that's maybe partly because Sands was in the double pivot, which I'll get to in just a second. And when they did go over the top, the timing on the runs wasn't correct. Alex Freeman was trying to make those runs in behind. But Roldan, after the U.S. has sort of struggled in the first 15, 20 minutes, he's the one yelling at these guys. He said his voice was hoarse after this game. He's the one yelling at Freeman and Haji and Pulisic to go and make those runs in beyond. To get all the way back to the U.S. not playing through the press, though, very briefly, I would have loved to see McKennie deeper in midfield in this game, because he's the one dropping to try and make plays as the U.S. are struggling in possession. He's the one trying to take the game by the scruff of the neck and help make things happen along with Roldan. And I don't know what you're worried about from Australia attacking-wise in this game that means you can't play McKennie deeper in midfield, right? Like, what is stopping you from having a McKennie-Roldan double pivot, or even a McKennie-Sands double pivot if you thought Sands was going to give you something in this game on the ball, which he didn't. But even if you thought that, you get McKennie as the superior distributor in that part of the field. Why don't you start with that from the jump and you roll out Luna and Pulisic in the attacking midfield spots? And then all of a sudden, Taylor, you're getting both the structure and the freedom that you talked about earlier, and you're still getting McKennie's distribution because he still dropped deeper in this game, and you allow him to range forward against a team like Australia who have very little in the way of attacking talent. To me, it seems very clear that Poch views McKennie as a 10, and I also disagree with that as like a permanent assignment of McKennie. I think in some games, like the Ecuador game, he makes a lot of sense to play higher up the field. In a game like this, where there's just nothing coming at you the other way, really almost nothing in this game from Australia in the attack, I don't know what you're afraid of by using McKennie deeper in midfield, and I think he could have really helped the U.S. even more in that spot.
Unless Pochettino also thought that Australia wouldn't press, and so you can have two guys in the double pivot who maybe aren't going to try to move the ball as quickly, aren't going to try to turn and carry it forward, and so he wanted to get reps with them, he wanted to get looks with them, but he also wanted a bit of stability in there. And once you do have Australia stepping out, maybe the idea is like they can then vacate that space and McKennie can drop in, and when the one player leaves, a little bit of a gap opens up. Either way, it still, Joe, speaks to he's experimenting with the double pivot, and McKennie isn't a primary
not part of it. Yep.
Part of the experiment.
Yeah.
Or McKennie is good enough and versatile enough that he thinks, well, I want to see these two guys, but I still want McKennie in the 11, so I'll put him as a 10. But all of that is still very experimental, very much throwing stuff against the wall, and one of those things being thrown is not McKennie in the double pivot.
One of the things that I thought worked for McKennie in this game was how Alex Freeman was keeping the width high and wide on the right side, and so I thought that was pulling some attention away from McKennie to then give him. I mean, the US, as this game went on, started to have some real joy in that sort of like right half space, which is where I saw McKennie for a lot of this match. So I accept your point, Joe. I just don't know whether he would then have that same freedom if he's on paper deeper in the midfield. I don't know whether like Freeman taking a player away from him would be applicable if he's in that position.
And the reason why I think I am more bullish about the U.S. at present is not just the results. It's little things that even still involve James Sands, who I agree was not good on the evening. The pass straight out of bounds when the U.S. like win the ball
not
back
the only
was
one.
just
Not the only one.
That's a bummer. But there's also a moment that I really enjoyed where basically Sands is on the ball. I think it's like Haji Wright tries to drop it off to Sands, and he like his one-touch back pass goes, I don't know, like 20 yards like up and behind, and Sands has to backpedal, and so it's a heavy chest back towards the middle of the pitch, and I think it's Mark McKenzie goes to try to get the ball. So it's basically Sands, like, if you're looking at like the center circle, they're at like the top of the circle on the U.S.'s side, and Sands is going to get the ball, McKenzie goes to get it, and Sands very clearly tells McKenzie, I got this, like, you go. Sands puts his foot on the ball, McKenzie opens up into that left half space, the kind of back three spreads out in the way they're meant to, and then they all kind of move forward together. And so even there, when you have a player who isn't performing well individually, I like that he still had the awareness of the situation to know, no, I'm supposed to be on the ball. I'm supposed to carry it here. You all are supposed to spread here. So then these guys can move centrally. And you can see those rotations. You can see that awareness within that team. So even if Sands doesn't have a very good night, I still like that you can see how well drilled these guys are and how aware they are of where they're supposed to be on the pitch when they have the ball.
Before we go to break, Taylor, can we speak about one of the players who came on, Diego Luna, who almost got a third goal in this game? Will we riot if he doesn't get minutes at the World Cup?
Yes, we will. I mean, he's in the team, like, no matter what, and he's there as a potential starter if somebody's hurt, but he is very much there as a difference maker. Are we still saying pace setter, tone changer, metronome?
No, not this again.
Adjuster? I don't know where we are on that, but he can also drop very deep when the opposition is causing problems in build-out. He can also lead the press. He did it like 5 times in the second half where he just sprinted 30 or 40 yards because he recognized like the weak side back pass is on. I'm going to sprint and make sure that it doesn't develop from there. And it didn't. He never wins it. He never wins it cleanly, but he always makes the center back either go back to the goalkeeper or back from where there was already pressure. So his defensive work was excellent. His on-the-ball work was excellent. His quick little one-touches, his little balls in behind, the runs he makes for the Brendan Aronson almost assist. Yeah, I thought Diego Luna was he is the difference maker when Pulisic goes off. I think the U.S. changes their approach, as I already said, but I think he makes that attack hum a little bit more than it maybe was otherwise.
Yeah, this was the best that we've seen of Luna for a while for the US, probably since the Guatemala semi-final, at the Gold Cup. I agree with everything you just said, Taylor. He was searching for the ball a lot. He was getting on it. He was getting turns. The wriggliness was back. Do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah.
Like the ability to barrel through a couple tackles and somehow keep hold of the ball. He looked like Diego Luna again, and I think my framing of Luna has changed somewhat since the start of the year when I did get a little bit carried away. Now, the context there was nothing seemed to be working for the US earlier this year, and Luna was one of the few guys that seemed to be latching on to Poch and his ideas. That's why I thought he would be a starter of the World Cup. I no longer think that, but this performance just reiterates he is a very useful option to have off the bench or as a rotation.
Marvellous. Let's take a quick break. When we come back and look at a few more of the key performances and what else stood out to us from this game. Join us then. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to our review of the USMNT's win over Australia. Obviously, Taylor, a bigger point of this game, or a bigger sour point of this game, was Christian Pulisic going off injured. He goes back to Italy with an injury. Can I read a part of Paul Tenorio and Henry Bushnell's Athletic match report from this one? Pochettino took issue with the conditions in this game, complaining that a sharp switch from the heat of Austin for last week's friendly against Ecuador to the relative cold of Denver risks the sort of injury that Pulisic picked up. It's a massive risk, said Pochettino. I think, Taylor, it does seem like that's a fair point. My question is, why don't the US play all of these games in warm climates going into the World Cup? Because it seems to me like it's a big competitive advantage for the US to have to be playing all these games in as close a climate as possible as you can get to the summer next year. England, for example,
I feel like you know the answer to this. I'm just going to throw that out there. I feel like you've asked this question having to know the answer. Go ahead. Tell me more about England.
Let me complete my thought. But European teams like England, who have strolled through qualification, are now into the World Cup. The biggest struggle they're going to have is the climate. It's going to be the heat. So why not try and have the US do as much of that, playing Miami and Texas for as many games as they can?
Would you like me to gesture the dollar sign with one hand or two hand, Ryan? That is the answer. It's
you can make dollars in Miami, Taylor.
You maybe? I'm not sure that's true. If you can, you have to pay exorbitant fees to make it happen. I think that's it. Is they want to rotate it around. They want to make sure that they get good attendances. This was well attended. I think sold out, and I think had a lot of butts in the seats. But then also I think there's a fear that if you go to some of those other locations, it's easier for international travel potentially. It's also easier if you're playing South American or Central American opposition to theoretically have more people there. So I do think there's also you're going to have a larger Latino population if you're playing a friendly against Mexico and Texas. You might not get favorable crowds accordingly. So I do think they like the cold weather because there's a feeling it gives them an advantage, especially if teams aren't accustomed to that or aren't prepared for it to have that switch. I do think that the next round of friendlies are both in Atlanta. Is that right? Yeah. Does anybody have that?
No, it's in March. That's in March.
It's the March one, yeah.
Okay. In November, the U.S. plays one of the games in Tampa. I can't remember the other game. Didn't know we were going to talk about.
Alaska, controversially.
There it is.
Very, very, very confusing.
Indoor with the heaters on, though, hopefully.
I like it. Yeah, there you go. That's it. That'll solve it. I didn't see that from Pochettino. I like that he is kind of advocating for these things, and I think has the cachet and paycheck to be able to say these things and not get in hot water, not get in trouble. I don't know if other coaches always have that level of freedom when it comes to U.S. soccer.
I mean, even just from the point of having to move the camp, right? Surely it's inconvenient for him and the players to have to shift from Austin to Denver for two different games. There's surely a scenario where they could be based in Texas, play one game in Austin, play the other game in Houston, and that's more manageable, and they stay in the same place and have the same roughly the same climate. So I accept his point. That maybe isn't ideal, particularly at this time of year where you've got not everywhere is cold and not everywhere is hot in October time.
One thing I thought was interesting about the Pulisic injury, I didn't realize how I mean, I guess I should have. I didn't realize how critical he is to this team from a momentum and like crowd standpoint. As soon as he comes off, like I was a little bit like, oh no, this is bad. But you could hear it for the next 2 to 3 minutes. The stadium was just like silent, not that it was the most like vocal atmosphere to begin with, but you had drums, you had singing, you had chanting, you had cheering, and it just became very much a concerned like mausoleum for a bit. And I think that he has kind of taken on that level of import when it comes to the fan base, justifiably so. And he was the one who, in those opening 20, 25 minutes, like was trying stuff, was driving at defenders, was making defenders uncomfortable. He is the one where he drives and then cuts back, and for a minute looks like he's going to continue on and shoot, but instead tries to go for the back pass, and no one is quite there for it. But it felt like he was individually trying to make everything happen. Everybody was really enjoying that. And so when he goes off, I wasn't sure how the U.S. would respond. I wasn't sure how the crowd would respond, and it's a credit to the American Outlaws, I assume, that they kind of got everybody back up and cheering and the drums going again. And then Diego Luna comes on and reminded us all why he is very, very fun. Graham, to your point about him, just going through people, he's that toy that, like, the inflatable toy that's weighted on the bottom, that if you, like, knock over, it just pops right back up. Like, that's Luna. Like, he just can't be knocked over unless he wants to be knocked over to draw the foul.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good analogy. He's one of my favourite players, and I'm pleased that it looks like he's back to being effective again, because he was too quiet for my liking for a few matches.
A friend of mine said he reminds me of Gattuso. That's just because he's short, right? I guess in like tenacity, maybe.
Yeah, he's kind of got the tenacious vibe as well. Something about the moustache.
Does he have a slightly antagonistic aesthetic as well? Is that fair?
He's quite like stocky as well. Like Gattuso's quite stocky to look at. Yeah, I can see that. I mean, totally different players, completely different players, but in vibes, I can see that.
Okay.
A lot of Gattuso and Joe as well. I want that on record.
People have said.
People do say that. Joe, we've talked about a lot of positive performances. Whose stock went down in this game?
Yeah, a few people, I think, went down in this game. I'm just going to work back to front, if that's all right. I thought Miles Robinson was real bad in this game. Pretty unhelpful defensively multiple times. We talked about already the U.S.'s breakdown on their goal. It was not the only breakdown defensively that the U.S. had in this game. The 46th minute, you get just the entire right side of the U.S. getting absolutely shredded. So Freeman's involved in that sequence. Yeah. Robinson's involved in that sequence. I believe Sands is involved in that sequence. It's like jokey defending, and this is part of why the U.S. don't get a higher grade on my brand new, never seen before 1 to 10 scale. Is that they just didn't defend consistently enough in this game. They didn't attack consistently enough either. But Robinson is there to be a defensive presence, because he's sure not there to help break the press, because he couldn't do that in this game. Was not comfortable on the ball under pressure, which he was several times in this game, under pressure that is. And outside of that one moment where he sweeps up the ball in transition in the 17th minute, he was rough. Just beaten, I think I have it like 4 times in this game. Not a good sign for Miles Robinson. I was a little higher on him after the Ecuador game. Not that after this game. Mark McKenzie I thought was bad as well. He's there, Mark McKenzie, primarily in my mind, to be a bang average defender and a useful player on the ball in possession. He was way too sloppy on the ball in this game and did not do enough defensively to make up for that fact. So 8th minute, he's out-muscled by Metcalf and concedes a foul. 20th minute, great. You get a lovely long ball to Pulisic over the top. Taylor, I think you talked a bit about that sequence. Then the 35th minute, he just straight up passes the ball out of bounds. 49th minute, he makes Matt Freeze's life really difficult in build-up, where, again, you're supposed to rely on Mark McKenzie in those situations. Didn't see it, continue to not really see it with any of these U.S. center backs other than Richards, who didn't have his best game either, Chris Richards. Working my way up the field. Alex Freeman, I thought, was basically anonymous in this game and wasn't great defensively. That's a shame. And I think we are reminded in a back three, the difference from Dest to Freeman, still big. Like, real big. So there's just a pin in that as far as Alex Freeman is concerned. And then Tim Weah. Maybe we'll pause here on Tim Weah. Tim Weah was used as a left wing back in this game after being used as a right winger in the last game. We've seen Weah on the right wing, we've seen him on the left wing, and now for the first time ever with the U.S., we saw him as a pure wing back, where he was a width provider in possession. He was an outside back in defense. He didn't give the U.S. anything in this game. He just didn't give the U.S. anything in that left-sided role. And I think that's a problem. He tries a few things early on in this game, like he's trying to combine. Passes aren't really coming off. He's sloppy.
He has the first shot of the game in the 30th minute.
That is his one positive moment. And Tim Weah, to his credit, can absolutely strike a ball. Like, his ability to put power behind the ball and to place it fairly well seems to be a legitimate skill of his. I will give him that. In general, he was sloppy in possession, was not incredible defensively. There's that 12th minute moment where the U.S. hold the offside line. I don't know if you guys remember this. And Kyle Martino, to his credit on the broadcast, points out how flat-footed Tim Weah is, where if they don't get that offside line exactly right, and credit to him that they did, right? But if they don't, Tim Weah has no chance to get back in that play. Like, he is completely off balance. His momentum is not in the right direction. He is toasted if that sequence doesn't go well. So I don't think he had a perfect defensive game, and he certainly didn't have a great attacking game. Now, what I will say is this is not all on Tim Weah. I do think part of this is on Pochettino, and Taylor, you said it well after the Ecuador game. I believe you said Poch doesn't know how to use Weah, doesn't know how he wants to use Weah, right? In this game, think about what Weah brings as a player. Tim Weah is not, let's think about what he's not, actually. He's not a 1v1 dribbler. He almost never takes players on and beats them 1v1 like you see from the best wingers in the world. That's why he's not.
He does do a lot of stand-up step-overs, though. Big fan of the stand-up step-over.
He's a skillsy guy, but he doesn't turn those into bypassing defenders. He turns that instead into drawing defenders and combining around them on the pass. Now, what Tim Weah does really well is he can serve a ball into the box. Now, we didn't see that against Ecuador, but we have ample data, I believe, in his career that says he is a plus crosser. Now, he's not a plus crosser on the left because he's not left-footed. So when you play him on the right, in theory, again, we didn't get this against Ecuador, but in theory, you get Tim Weah playing the ball into the box, well-weighted. In this game, when you play him on the left, you take that skill away completely from Tim Weah, and you basically say all you can do, Weah, is combine, which he didn't do well in this game, too sloppy, or you can go and dribble. You can dribble inside, in particular, onto your right foot, which he doesn't do. The only time he does that in this game is to take a shot from outside the box. Whoop-de-doo, right? I mean, I think part of this is on
with Alex
Weah.
Freeman at the back post screaming for it. I'm just going to add that.
There it is. I didn't pick up on that, Taylor. That's a good pull. It's on Weah for not playing well. It's on Pochettino for not knowing how to use him. I think it's clear that Weah does not belong on the left. He's got to be on the right somewhere if he's going to play. And I think at this stage, he doesn't even really have to play either.
That's kind of my thing, Joe, because I might quibble a little bit with how reliable I think his service is. I think it can be when he has gotten past the guy so he has a little bit more time and space to pick his head up and find that pass. But I think, to your point, if he hasn't beaten that person on the dribble or if he hasn't gotten in behind, I think he regularly fails to clear the first defender, or it usually deflects out for a corner or maybe gets blocked for a throw-in. And that's not the worst thing necessarily, but I think for the longest time my thought was he is a direct threat down the wing that can then play that cross, that kind of like centering driven pass because he's in space. And if you're going to use him more in kind of stand-up one-on-one situations and then ask him to cross, and if it's on the left side especially, I think we kind of run into some questions as to Weah's feasibility in the team. But I still love Tim Weah, and I still really think he could be like an elite player for the U.S. I just think he has to kind of add some new elements to his game or maybe get more to grips with what Poch needs of him. And that's something he's done before with U.S. coaches, Weah has. So maybe it can happen again during this break.
All right, so Graham, we framed this obviously as a good performance, but we've also highlighted some disappointing performances. We've highlighted a failure to play through the press and some shaky defending. So work to be done also.
Yeah, for sure. And I know this. The results are sort of flipped here, but I felt more positive. Of the two games, I thought the Ecuador performance was the more rounded against a better team as well. But I feel like for the first time, meaningful progress is being made. I think we're seeing a Pochettino team for the first time in terms of the overall intensity and the framework and the ability to get into attacking transition, in particular in the Ecuador game, I thought was really impressive. And he's clearly putting meat on the bones in terms of not just a starting lineup, but his depth chart as well. Like, we know Alex Freeman now is ahead of like Joe Scally or whoever else on that right side. We know that he likes Max Arston. We know that Christian Roldan is at least in the picture. We know he sees Weston McKennie as like competition for Malik Tillman rather than in like in the double pivot. We know that Haji Wright is in the picture for like the number 9. So things are starting to flesh out, and they're starting to flesh out more quickly than I had envisaged coming out of the Gold Cup, and when I was really quite negative about the place that the US was in. Felt like time was ebbing away. So, I have to give Pochettino some credit for that. He seems to have rescued the situation in a way that I didn't totally envisage a couple of months ago, which is a relief because that World Cup opening game is getting closer and closer. 237 days, guys, until the start of that tournament. How are we feeling about that?
But who's counting?
Not me.
Exactly a month, Joe, until we see the US back in action as well, November 15th. It's the Guy guys coming up, Paraguay and then Uruguay in the next international break. Presumably what we hope to see in that next window is more progress and more of these starters we'll expect for the tournament next summer.
Yeah, I think Graham said it well. It seems like this group is narrowing. Pochettino is narrowing his focus. It's taken a while to get to this point, but we are actually here. I think maybe we'll have a window to talk more about who we want to see in that roster later on this week. I do think it is very clear that some players have been seizing these moments and some have not. And one, just to be very, very clear, that I think did not in this game and that I don't really care to see next month is James Sands. I know we already kind of dinged him a little bit, and I don't want to go in too much harder on him, but what he brings to the table is ball winning. What the U.S. does not need in midfield is more ball winners. Like, they just don't. Tyler Adams is already there. Cardoso's already there. Those guys are made of glass, you say? Okay, Aiden Morris is already there. Like, there's just too many. There's too many of those players, and Sands might legitimately be the worst of those players with the ball. Maybe he's better than Cardoso, at least in a U.S. shirt. But Sands just brought nothing in possession in this game. Just nothing over and over and over again. And in this game, he had time. He had space. It's hard. It is a hard one for me with James Sands.
He didn't have a single pass into the final third. For context, Aiden Morris was on the field for 40 minutes plus stoppage time, had 4.
Yeah.
Which I think tells you something about how Sands performed.
It's not like Morris, to be clear, was great in this window. He wasn't. I thought he was pretty poor against Ecuador. I didn't think he was super special coming off the bench in this game. Tessman started both of his appearances so slowly. Like, he comes off the bench in this game, and he is like giving the ball away left and right for the first 15 minutes that he's on the field. But eventually those players work through something to give you something. And Sands, it just didn't seem to me ever did that. So none of these U.S. center mids are perfect that we saw in this window, but Sands would be on the bottom of that quartet for me.
You could see it with Sands. I just want to really quickly. You could see when McKennie comes off and he's like sitting on the bench and he's talking to somebody in a very animated way, and Sands is in between them, just like kind of staring into the middle ground, expressionless. And I'm pretty sure that is the look of a guy who knows he did not do particularly well in a game where he needed to play well.
Yeah, and the reality of the situation for the US is these guys, if you're coming in late into this team, like, you need to be making the most of your 1 or 2 opportunities you're getting in a camp. Otherwise, you're crossed off. And that's not to say that James Sands can't be useful in another cycle or going forward, or that he's not going to develop further in the Bundesliga. But right now, it's difficult to make a case for him in the same way that other players have come into this team and not made the most of their opportunity. And then that's it, because this is not a normal cycle for Pochettino. He needs to be making quick decisions.
Yeah, and that's where, again, I'm coming around to like really enjoying Pochettino. Maybe that is just the recency bias, but I like that he gave him a chance. And with the condensed timeline, maybe he doesn't get another opportunity, Sands, even if he continues to play well for FC St. Pauli. But at least we kind of have a sample size, small as it might be, to be able to point to and say, he tried, it didn't really work. And that's how I feel about Josh Sargent as well. And I think that's really critical to just kind of getting everybody on board, the fan base included, and also letting people know, like, there's still an opportunity, you're still going to get a look, but you've got to perform if you get that look. And so I think it challenges the people who are kind of consensus starters or consensus squad members, but also gives hope to those who aren't. And I think that's the balance you have to strike as a national team manager.
There you go. So maybe Sands will be on the beach next summer, which is nominative to tournament at its finest. Easy for me.
Unless he's flowing through an hourglass.
Indeed, the sands of time. They come for us all, Taylor. We are celebrating a Pochiversary this week, Taylor. So we'll say maybe we should get together on the feed later and have a little chat about that. Should we do that?
I just want to be clear that Ryan demanded that be the show for this week, that we talk more about the U.S. and Pochettino. He said, not enough international chat. I need more.
Weirdly, he also said, and then do a full segment on Scotland, which seemed particularly out of character. But, I mean, you do you, Ryan.
Well, he spent so much time celebrating England's qualification for the World Cup this week that, he feels he needs to cover more bases. So,
hey, Graham, I looked up to the screen at least 5 times during England's 5-0 win over Latvia, to my credit, yesterday. Thank you very much.
I feel so sorry for you supporting a country that qualifies for these things without even trying.
It's a burden. We carry it all. We all carry it, Graham. It's fine. Well, you don't carry it, but we do.
Thankfully.
Yeah, there we go. All right, Taylor Rockwell, thank you very much indeed for your contributions to this here conversation. We appreciate you.
Watch.
Joe Lowry, thank you very much.
Bosh.
And Graham Ruthven, what's your noise? Perfect.
Double bosh.
Nailed it.
Sweet. There we go. We'll keep that one on the tape. Listener, thank you very much indeed for joining us on this one. We'll be back on the feed very shortly indeed. But for now, bye.